Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov, and it's nice to see everyone. Thank you for joining the learning from the OU, from OU Israel, and I hope everyone is well. We'll begin with a kapitel Tehillim Perach Kuf Chaf Aleph 121. Shir Lamalos Esayinai La'arim Yain Yavo Ezri Meimadinai Osei Shamayim Va'aretz. Al yitain lamod raglecha al yanum shomrecha hinei lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra yishmor es nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzeiska ugoecha me'ata v'ad olam. This morning for our Divrei Chizuk, what I'd like to share with you are three ideas from Rav Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, and three ideas that I think are very worthwhile and hopefully inspirational for all of us as we're beginning our week this Monday morning here in Yerushalayim, here in Eretz Yisrael. There is a Gemara that is quoted by Rav Kook, and it's a well-known Gemara. It's found at the end of Meseches Kesubos, and that is Kuf Yud Beis 112 Amud Aleph. And it speaks about Rabbi Abba when he would come to the land of Israel, as he would make his way up on the shore of Akko, that he would pick up the stones, the rocks of Akko, and he would kiss the stones. And Rav Kook has a beautiful comment on this Gemara. And by the way, this is something that we're somewhat familiar with, especially those that came to Israel years ago, coming off the El Al flight, and you'd come to the tarmac as you would reach the ground, and many people had the custom of kissing the earth, kissing the stones of Eretz Yisrael. So Rav Kook says the following. He says it's interesting that the Gemara points out that he kissed the stones of Eretz Yisrael, the stones as opposed to the ground, to the earth of Eretz Yisrael. And there's an interesting contrast there, comparison. And he says when we think about the ground of Eretz Yisrael, the earth of Eretz Yisrael, we might think about the mitzvot that are tluyot ba'aretz, those mitzvot that are connected to the land of Israel. And we would think about Eretz Yisrael in terms of the mitzvot, the many mitzvot that one can only perform in the land of Israel. But that's not what Rabbi Abba did. Rabbi Abba picked up the stones of Israel. The stones itself, there's no mitzvah per se. And what that represents is a love for Eretz Yisrael just for the sake of Eretz Yisrael, that embedded in the land of Israel, the rocks of Israel, the very existence of the land of Israel is Kedusha. That Hashem has injected Kedusha within Eretz Yisrael. And we love Eretz Yisrael just because it is Eretz Yisrael. It is a gift of Hashem. It is what we just read in Parshas Lech Lecha, that this is the land that will be your land, the land for generations, given to Avraham and given to every Jew throughout the generations. So that is the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, which I find something really interesting. And this Agadata, this story in the Gemara of kissing the stones of Eretz Yisrael, we actually find it in a halachic work in the Mishnah Torah. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Malachim, Perek Hey, Halacha Yud, Gedolei HaChachamim, the great rabbis, Hayu Menashkin al Tchumei Eretz Yisrael, when they would come to the borders of Israel, they would enter Eretz Yisrael, Umenashkin Avaneha, that they would kiss the stones of Eretz Yisrael. Interesting that the Rambam brings this lehalacha in his halachic work, and we know that the Rambam generally does not bring a gadata. He's not interested in telling stories from the Gemara in his halachic work. And some point out that, well, this is part of the halacha itself. Part of the halacha of Eretz Yisrael is the chibat haaretz, is the love that we have, and that we are aware of the intrinsic kedusha that's found in Eretz Yisrael, and that we have a tremendous love for the land of Israel. And the Rambam is not just mentioning the story, but the Rambam is bringing the story as a halachic comment. And that is that part of what it means to be connected to Israel is not only the mitzvot of Eretz Yisrael, but to feel a deep love and to feel a deep yearning for Eretz Yisrael. So that is lesson number one from Rav Kook in terms of Rabbi Abba kissing the rocks, kissing the stones of Eretz Yisrael. Two other lessons that I want to share with you, and they both come from the work Orot, and they come from a section called Hamilchama. Rav Kook begins his work, and this is considered to be one of his most important, the classic work of Orot, where he speaks about Eretz Yisrael. He begins talking about the significance of Eretz Yisrael. Actually, the topic that we just touched on is how he opens the section. And right after that, he moves to the section of Milchama, HaMilchama, which is about war. And it seems to me that Rav Kook was already aware of the fact that to be in Eretz Yisrael, to return to Eretz Yisrael, is the reality is going to be that we're going to face wars, and that's part of the challenge of being here, and part of our challenge right now that all of us are facing, to be a part of this, to be living with it. And Rav Kook addresses what war is all about. The lesson that I want to share with you is actually the second piece that's found in HaMilchama, and Rav Kook highlights the following idea, which I think is a very, very, very beautiful and inspiring idea. And that is that when we think about war, often we think about war as not necessarily being a Jewish thing, and it certainly is not a Jewish thing. It's not something that we want to engage in. It's the very last thing that we want to see, that we want to experience. But there are times that there is war. There are times that we need to go to battle, and he says that the truth is this is very much embedded within the very DNA of the Jewish people. If we look at the great leaders of the Jewish people going back to the time of the Torah itself, and we just read about this past Shabbos in terms of Avraham Avinu, we think of Avraham Avinu as a person of chesed, which he was, hachnasas orchim, in terms of emunah, in terms of faith, in terms of kiruv, in terms of discovering Hashem. All of that is true about Avraham. But there is another aspect of the life of Avraham, and that is that he was a warrior, that he was a commander, that he went to war, that he led a battle. And this is what Rav Kook writes in HaMilchama. This is the second piece in HaMilchama, and I'll just read one line. Anu mistaklim b'torot harishanim. When we look back and we look at the earlier generations, hamisuparim b'torah, the stories that we all know from the Torah itself, b'nevim, u'biktuvim, when we study the works of the Nevi'im, of the prophets, and Ketuvim, otam hadorot shayu asukim b'milchama, we see that many of those personalities were great personalities who were also engaged in war. V'heim haggedolim, these are the great personalities. These are our role models. Shanu mityachasim alehem, we connect with them, we think about their lives, we think about how our lives are connected to their lives. B'yididut, we think about them in an intimate way, that Avraham Avinu is not just a person in the past, but someone that very much influences and impact, as if we're living with Avraham Avinu in our day as well, Ugedulat Kodesh, and the great holiness of those personalities. So when we think about those personalities and we look up to those personalities, part of what we should remind ourselves of, and that we should know and deep in our souls and deep in our hearts, to know that they were great warriors, and that's part of what it means to be a Jew, and that's what it means to be a Jew at this time, those that are on the battlefield, and all of us as well, to have the Chizuk, to have the strength to be warriors, to know that we are on a mission, and that we are here to be victorious for the sake of Hashem. Leman Shemo B'Ahava. He ends the paragraph with the following line: the Otana Nishamot HaChazakot, and these great souls, the great souls of Avraham Avinu, of David HaMelech, people that went to war, Chozrot Lichiot Banu Kimei Olam, they are still living in us, that we have a piece, we have a spark of their courageousness, that they were warriors, that we have that characteristic as well. And when I read this piece, it reminded me of a piece from Rav Chaim Volozhin, from the Ruach Chaim, from his commentary on Pirkei Avos. Rav Chaim Volozhin writes that the Mishnah says that Avraham Avinu, that he passed 10 tests, Asara Nisyonot. And on that Mishnah, Rav Chaim Volozhin writes, why does it say Avraham Avinu? It could just simply write Avraham. And he says the following, that he is Avraham Avinu because we are very much connected to our father and to our forefather, that we have the spiritual DNA within us. And all those great characteristics of Avraham Avinu, Chesed, Emunah, but also this characteristic as well that Rav Kook is highlighting, the bravery, the courageousness, the ability for us, even though we're people of peace, but when when we are forced to do it, to go to war and to defend our people and to be victorious in war. So this is what it means to be a descendant of Avraham Avinu as well, and that we should take inspiration, we should think about as well, and to take Chizuk, knowing that we are descendants of Avraham, descendants of David HaMelech, descendants of great personalities, great warriors of our people. One other idea from Rav Kook, and this is actually the first comment that Rav Kook makes and the first idea that he shares in terms of what it means to go to war, what it means to be in a war for the Jewish people. And Rav Kook is always the optimist. If you read Rav Kook, all the writings of Rav Kook, somehow he is able to find a spark of light and of goodness in everything. And even when it comes to war, and as we said a moment ago, it is the very last thing that we want to be a part of. It is something that brings with it great suffering and great pain. And yet there is some positive value that Rav Kook says that we are to see in whenever we engage in war. And he writes the following. These are the words of Rav Kook. He begins, and this is the first line in his first teaching about war in the section of Orot called HaMilchama. Kishiyesh milchama gedola be'olam, when there is a great war in the world, mitorer koach Mashiach. There is a power of Mashiach that is awakened. Eit hazamir higia. He quotes from Shir Hashirim, and the quote says that this is a time of zemer. There's actually, again, hard to imagine that this is that we can speak about war in terms of song, but it's a time of where we can be uplifted as well. And zemer means song, but zemer, and he's going to say zemir aratzim. Zemir also means to cut down, to destroy. That we're destroying those evil people in the world. Harisha'im lichadim ha'olam. We wipe out evil from the world. Va'olam mitbasem. And the world becomes the fragrance of goodness and of hope and of peace begins to be. That is the fragrance that we can sense in the world. V'kol hator nishma be'artzenu, and there's a song of the dove that we can hear in our land. A very poetic, a very beautiful piece. What is Rav Kook referring to? I think what Rav Kook is referring to is something that all of us are experiencing in a very, very positive way, and it's been commented on, I think, by just about everyone, by every rabbi and anyone here in Israel that's going through this. And that is the unity that we're feeling, the love that we're feeling for one another, the empathy that we feel for one another, how everybody is looking for an opportunity for a way to make a difference, to volunteer, to make a contribution, to daven, to learn. And Rav Kook says that when there is war, there's also the koach Mashiach, that there's a strength, that there's a potential for Mashiach. And we talk about Mashiach, what are we referring to when we speak about Messianic times? Messianic times means a time where there is an evil in the world, when we wipe out Amalek, and that is what war is about. That's what this war is about. Evil, to stamp out, to destroy that which is evil, rishut from the world, from Eretz Yisrael, and from the entire world around us. And the other part of Mashiach, when we talk about Messianic days, the other emphasis is the idea of peace, the idea of caring for one another, that there's greater chesed in the world, that there's greater concern, that there's greater care, that there's a sense of serenity between people, where we look at others in a different way, where we see the best in one another. That is what we mean by Messianic times. So Rav Kook says, and so beautifully, and again, we should be inspired by this idea and to take this idea, and maybe most importantly, as everybody is speaking about as well, is to take these feelings and this awakening, the awakening to spirituality and to chesed and to emunah, and to carry it with us from these days, and Be'ezrat Hashem, to see a different Jewish people and to see a different world after this war. Rav Kook writes the following. I'll close this piece of Rav Kook and make one last comment. He closes out this first piece that he writes about war. Tzrichim lekabel et hatochen hanisa shel or Hashem. That we are to accept, we are to take advantage of this opportunity. It's an opportunity as well right? This new light that's coming into the world, Shel Or Hashem HaMitgaleh B'Pe'ula Nifla'a, right? Amazing things. And people are talking about how amazing, how remarkable the Jewish people are, to see the strength of the Jewish people, to see the kindness of the Jewish people, to see the soldiers, the secular soldiers that are hugging the Hasidim that are providing food, those that want to enlist in the army, right? Thousands of people that are asking from the Haredi sector to be a part of the army, right? To take this Or Hashem, to take this new light and to run with it, to take advantage of it. And he closes with the following, which is a quote that we say every single day in davening, and maybe we can bring a new kavanah to that as we say it right before Kriyat Shema. We say that Hashem is Baal Milchamot, that Hashem oversees, that He's the master of Milchama when there is war. It's also a war with the providence of Hashem, that God is overseeing this war. Zorea Tzedakot. But in planting, there is a planting right now of tzedakah, of righteousness and of justice, matzmiach Yeshua, that this is the beginning, we hope, the flowering of a redemption, of Yeshua, of a salvation. So this, Rav Kook says, is something that we should very much be aware of, something that we should be thinking about, and that we should grab onto the opportunity, yes, the difficulty of war, the torment of war, how difficult these days are, but also to see, Rav Kook is always teaching us how to see the light, right? How to see the positive, how to take the good from it. And there is so much good along with the suffering, to see that and to be inspired by that, and to continue, please God, all of us on an individual basis, and in terms of all of Yisrael, to continue down that path and to take this opportunity, the opportunity that we have of the more chesed and the more volunteering, the more learning, the more davening, the more tehillim, and to take that with us and to bring Yisrael to greater heights. One last idea I'll share with you, and then we'll conclude with the Achenu. And this is also a teaching that is connected to Rav Kook. You know, whenever we study Rav Kook, one of the questions that's asked is, who is the inspiration? Where does Rav Kook draw his teachings from? And one of the great inspirations for Rav Kook and his writings is the Maharal of Prague. And the Maharal of Prague also talks about Eretz Yisrael in terms of the loving relationship that we are to have, the deep connection that we are to have to Eretz Yisrael. And in one piece in Netzach Yisrael, he speaks about two words, and the Maharal of Prague is very sensitive to language and to words and to the Hebrew language. And he speaks about the two words. One word is Ga'al or Geula, which is redemption. Right? We're thinking about that in terms of salvation, redemption in a time of war. The other word, which is very similar, is the word Galut or Gala, Gimel Lamed Hey, which is exile, the Jewish people outside of the land of Israel. And he says the two words are connected and really interconnected. The idea that there is Galut also means that there's going to be a Geula. But he compares the two words. The word Ga'al, let's look at that word for a moment. The word Ga'al, and they're very similar. The word Ga'al has an Aleph in the center, Gimel, Aleph, Lamed. And the Aleph in the center represents one. It represents the oneness of Hashem. It represents the oneness of Am Yisrael, the oneness of Am Yisrael in the land of Israel. Goy Echad Ba'aretz. So there is the Aleph in the center, Ga'al, and that's where it needs to be. That is the ideal. And that is what Geula, Ga'al, is all about. Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, the oneness of Am Yisrael, the oneness of Am Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. But then we have the word Gala, Gola. And here we have the Gimel, the Lamed, and the Hey. The Aleph is no longer there. And we have the same letters, but then the Hey is at the very end. The Hey at the very end is 5. That point of oneness, the point of the oneness of Hashem, the oneness of Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. And even when we're spread all over the world, we know that there is that point to return to, right? The point of Eretz Yisrael, to return to Eretz Yisrael. So that's what we're praying for today, a oneness of Am Yisrael. There is a great oneness of Am Yisrael here in Eretz Yisrael. There's a great oneness that we're feeling with Jews all over the world. I know here at the OU, there's a mission of about 40 rabbis that are coming literally in a few hours and representing communities from all over America. And Jews everywhere are praying for Eretz Yisrael. So there is that sense of oneness that sense of oneness here in Eretz Yisrael. Jews throughout the world, they're all feeling connected at this time. And as Rav Kook said before, how important the idea is that what we're feeling now and we're feeling in these days of war, the positive side of that, that's something that we should hold on to, that we should grab onto, and that we should continue to build from that place of oneness. We should merit in the coming days to have Yeshuot and Nechamot, that we should see salvation. We should feel a sense of Nechama, that God should help us get through these difficult days. Those that are experiencing great difficulty, those that have had losses in their families, those that are suffering in terms of being injured, and all of us on some level are suffering through these days, that Hashem should bring all of us Nechama, and we should see Yeshuot, we should see salvation and great miracles and wonders in the coming days. Be'ezrat Hashem. So I thank you for joining us this morning. As I always say, it's a great chizuk. Just seeing one another, being together with one another is already uplifting, and we're mechazek just by getting together for the few minutes. We'll conclude with the Achenu, and everyone is welcome to join in with this tefillah. Achenu kol beis Yisrael, hanesunim batzara v'shivya ha'omdin bein bayam ubein v'yabasha. Hamakom yirachem alehem v'yotziei mitzara lirvacha me'afela le'ora mishibud ligula hashta bagala uvizman kariv v'nomar amen. Everyone should be safe and be well. Bezrat Hashem, look forward to seeing you soon back at the OU Center. Kol Tov. Have a good day, everyone.